Welcome to Landwards, the podcast for the land-based engineering community, brought to you by the Institution of Agricultural Engineers.
Welcome to Landwards, the Institution of Agricultural Engineers podcast. I am your host today, Andy Newbold, editor of Landwards, and I am joined today by Esther Kimani, who is the founder and CEO of Farmer Lifeline Technologies. Hello, Esther.
Hi, how are you, Andy?
I'm great, thank you, Esther. It's been lovely to meet you, and thank you very much for joining us. Alongside Esther, I have literally sitting in the room alongside Esther, we have Toby Mottram, who listeners will know as a fellow of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers and a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineers as well. Toby, I think at this point you should tell us why we're here.
Okay. Well, it's good to meet you again, Andy, especially online. The Royal Academy of Engineering is the prestigious institution to which all engineers are eligible to join. But if you're lucky enough, they ask you to be a fellow, which I am. And there are very few of us agricultural engineers within the fellowship. So I sometimes sit down in meetings with people who've invented hovercraft or jet engines or something like that. It's a quite high level. And then when I say, oh, I invented robot milking, they say, oh, wow, that's really interesting and difficult. So hence the Royal Academy of Engineering also likes to sponsor prizes in different parts. Africa and the Africa prize is for any engineering project or student in Africa who's got something interesting to talk about, and it's very rare for an agricultural engineer to be highlighted. So Esther was my mentee, and much to my delight, she was given the Africa prize this year, and she's in London today to collect her award at a very prestigious dinner introduced by all sorts of people at a very high level. So that's the backstory. And over to you for ask a question. Sorry, I've run out of ideas.
So no, that's good. And just for reference purposes, Esther's name may have cropped up for listeners in the past because there is a little piece on page 15 in the summer 24 edition of Landwards, which talks about the 2024 Africa Prize for Engineering, and Esther is listed as one of the finalists. So that's really why we find ourselves here today at relatively short notice, let's put it that way. So Esther, we're speaking to a community of agricultural engineers who are a relatively broad church. So I thought we'd rather quite like to get to know you, let's put it that way. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Andy. I'm a farm girl. I'm born in a village where I've seen farming growing up, and that was our bread and butter. And I got to see how devastating pests and diseases would affect our livelihoods as farmers. And that would mean some of our basic needs would go unmet when crops were destroyed by pests and diseases. And of course, the adverse effects of climate change made situations even worse. But nonetheless, I had the opportunity to study computer science at the university. And I was actually among the very few girls among my peers who made it to the university and took a bold step to do computer science from encouragement by my parents, who were like, that brain needs to do something mind-boggling, like engineering. And I was more than open to see what computer science had in store. And so after graduating, I felt a point of responsibility that I left home to change home. And in this case, home being marginalized rural smallholder farmer communities like the one I came from, and use technology to empower them. And in this case, get them ahead of pests and diseases. So that's how Farmer Lifeline was born, based on my own background and passion in tech. So that's how I found myself as an engineer in agriculture. We call it agri-tech. but I'm an engineer in agriculture. So that's how Farmer Lifeline was born, and that's our vision. It's been what keeps us going. It's been our inspiration to just see the livelihoods of smallholder farmers improved in the best way we know how to, by using AI and machine learning.
So what, you studied you studied computer science at university. How did you get to where you are now after university then?
That's a good question, Andy. Being a woman in STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, it's not very easy. I was sharing actually that only 30% of the students who graduated from my class were women or ladies, if I could say so. And it's more of a male dominated field when you talk about engineering, leave alone agri-tech. So there was tough competition from our male counterparts, and we had to do a lot to prove that we knew what we were doing, um, especially from campus. But I also certified as a software developer. That is to also add some layer to my undergraduate. And so when Farmer Lifeline was being born, I at least had some good knowledge on the subject matter on tech. That's in machine learning and AI. And then I had to be backed by a team of software developers also when we were beginning the prototyping. And those ones really formed the backbone of Farmer Lifeline before we even brought other team members on board, seeing how the hardware would interact with the software. And yeah, just come up with something that just doesn't look like what you thought, but it's at least doing something that you can work on to get to where we are today. So it's been a long time coming. It's had its own set of challenges and opportunities, but we still move nonetheless.
I think this probably would be a good point for me to hand over to my colleague Toby. And Toby, do you want to delve a little bit deeper into the early crop pest and disease detection device, and maybe ask Esther a few questions on that?
Yes, thanks, Andy. My questions are very technical. Clearly, Esther has identified a problem. So how did you go about solving it? What was your platform, and how difficult was it to get started?
First, identifying the problem wasn't very hard because I had grown up in that environment and I knew the problem at its core. And I looked at the solutions that we had as farmers. Like one, we relied a lot on our intuition to detect pests and diseases with our naked eye. And sometimes nutrient deficiencies would be mistaken for diseases, or a disease could be mistaken for a nutrient deficiency, hence a fertilizer being used instead of a pesticide or a pesticide instead of a fertilizer. And even detecting the pests and diseases when it's too late. And we couldn't do much when a third of our crops are already infested or a disease has already spread, not only to our farm, but also to neighbors around. So there was the place of intuition. Then the ratio of agricultural extension officers from where I come from in Kenya, one agricultural extension officer is rationed to about 2,000 smallholder farmers. So we never saw an extension officer during our farming. And if we did, it could have been maybe in one of the community meetings, but barely did we even know who they are. And that's the situation to date. They are outnumbered. So the extension services couldn't get to every smallholder farmer. Then after some time, we had technologies like the drones that came up, and drones would charge $100 per hour to fly over farms. And so my question, the question that lingered in my head is, when I look at the options that we had, it's either we detect the pests or diseases when it's too late with our intuition, have to wait for an extension officer, which can be never, or now call a drone at $100 per hour, which would be actually our income. Probably in an entire farming season, we could be getting that $100. So I thought of a technology that will give 24-hour surveillance of farms at an affordable price for smallholder farmers, detect the pests and diseases on time, and recommend locally available and affordable solutions for them.
Well, thank you. You identified the problem. So how did you choose a platform that would meet that price specification?
It took a lot of research, borrowing from what I would see. The drone would give surveillance for a certain amount of time, but it wouldn't be there on the farm 24/7. So I looked at my environment and looked at what around me gives me 24-hour surveillance, and a camera came to mind. Because when I also looked at mobile applications that would detect pests and diseases, they also use the camera. And so thinking around this camera, how can it be used for a 24-hour surveillance? So that's where the camera idea came in, because it's something that will be mounted on the farm. It's 24 hours on the farm, so there will be timely detection. Doesn't need a farmer to walk around or scout. Wouldn't cost much. That is based on our economics, unit economics of the device. But we started actually with leasing it at $1. And we realized it's not making sense for us as a business, and had to remodel that to what we have today at $3 a month.
So you have a price model, and did you write the software yourself, or did you subcontract that or hire someone to do that?
At the beginning, I had to hire software developers like myself, because there was a lot involved, both with hardware and the software. I had to identify persons who are skilled in embedding software into hardware, and then those who are really skilled now in the writing of code. So we started it ourselves, writing the algorithms ourselves, even training the models, the machine learning models to detect the different pests and diseases on different crops. We had to start that. We ourselves, though it was quite limiting, because machine learning takes a lot of time and it's capital intensive. So we realized we wouldn't cover much ground if we continued only relying on what we knew and had at hand. So we had to outsource also for other models that we would use to detect the pests and diseases. So that would help us even on a scale and meet a crop that is not familiar to us in the Kenyan context, will still remain relevant to that farmer.
Well, thank you for that. Now, so you produced a prototype, but now I think you've got many different farmers using your service. Tell us how you've managed to scale up from one device to many devices.
I would like to appreciate the place of grants that come in to help startups that are heavily capital intensive on research and development. I think in one of the sessions I had with my mentor, Toby, he told me that if someone wants a new version within a day, they should look for a magician, and not for an engineer. They should look for a magician. And that made sense, because research and development takes time. It takes finances. Sometimes it rips you off the last coin that you had, and you just wait for someone to just see things as you see them and believe in you to invest. So grants came in really handy. We received a grant of about 50,000 USD, and it helped us move from the first version of our innovation to what we called version 001. and that had improved capabilities. I was able to pay some additional developers, also get a manufacturer who would reduce the costs of producing the different hardware components for ourselves, even with the intellectual properties that we had acquired, signed an exclusive manufacturer's agreement. All this is capital intensive, and the grant really came in handy for us. I reached out to accelerator programs. I looked at what they were offering. Some were tech, more of tech, others were more business inclined. And I applied for all this so that I would get knowledge and skills, both not only as a tech person, but also as a businesswoman, so that I could handle my team based on the ecosystem that we found ourselves in. So grants really came in handy together with accelerator programs.
Well, that's quite a journey that you've undertaken already. How big is your team now, and how many devices are you supporting?
We are currently a team of over 10. We are more than 10 on the ground, but 6 are permanent in the office. The others are seasonal employees who we hire on a need basis when we're going to train farmers on the ground. And there's also opportunity to hire more trainer of trainers when it comes to disseminating information about the technology to rural smallholder farmers. And it's good to say that we also have an advisory board that I put together. Being a sole founder, I found need to also have a board of advisors who would help me so that I don't wake up one day and I convert the business into a biscuit manufacturing business. Yeah, so I needed a board of advisors. Yes, Andy, like those. I
Just
needed a board
held a
of
pack of biscuits up for listeners there.
Yeah, so I do have a board of advisors. They keep me in check. I also feel accountable to them because the team would see me as the CEO and they feel they may not ask me questions. But with the board of advisors, they keep me in check. They ask the tough questions. I can also be vulnerable with them when there are tough decisions that I need to make in the company, including a decision like moving from sole proprietorship to a limited company. I think they really came in handy to show me that investors would want to see that kind of growth of a business, moving from sole proprietorship to a limited company to now you're having shares, and now guiding us on even how allocation of shares can be. So it's been one step at a time with the team. We're growing bigger. And even as I look at the number of devices, we have over 1,000 devices mounted on farms, covering over 5,000 farms in Kenya, impacting over 19,000 smallholder farmers currently, 60% of this being women. I still look that this team will grow. It will have to grow even as we spread across the different counties that we intend to. Our target, Toby, is 1 million smallholder farmers by 2030. It's big and it scares me, but if it's not big enough to scare me, then it's just not big enough. So we're targeting 1 million smallholder farmers by 2030.
Well, Esther, that's a huge, ambitious goal, but I'm sure you'll achieve it. Now, we talked earlier about some of the new challenges that come in as your network spreads. And tell us about some of the issues of data security and the farmers who are within sight of your cameras but not paying customers.
That's a good question, Toby, especially when you talk about data privacy today and the awareness that has been created around personally identifiable information, and realizing that our cameras are collecting a lot of such kind of data. So one thing that we were intentional with is aligning with the Data Protection Act in Kenya. We have a Data Protection Act that we had to align with so that all our forms, all the data we are collecting is in line with the government rules and regulations, even how we analyze it, how we share it with third parties, and ensuring that no personally identifiable information is shared with a third party, and also ensuring that the farmers know that they own the data, yes, and in what context it's being used. And not only this, also using that data as a resource to again plow back to the farmer, which is something that we are also looking at, how we can use the analysis of this data to open up new markets, new credit facilities for these farmers, so that in as much as they are producing their data, they also see the benefit of us handling and analyzing their data. So there's been that challenge of farmers who are near the camera. For example, I've mounted it on one farm, and there are farmers around it who would still get to know about the recommendations of this one device. It's been hard to limit how information is shared from one farmer to the next, but that's why we're looking at launching our version 3 device, which will serve more farmers, including the neighboring farmers, so that they are also within coverage. They also get the benefits of not only recommendations, but also the additional services of credit facilities or discounted pesticides and the like, so that it's also a good ecosystem where we can hold these farmers together, bring them together, and they can also help us in sharing word.
Well, thank you, Esther. It strikes me that you're not only an innovator in the engineering, because software engineering is engineering, and the building of the devices, but you've also begun to expand your business horizons to include many things which are beyond what engineers normally worry about. How do you deal with all these different strands? Are you doing much engineering now, or are you more a business person?
Oh, that's a good question, Toby. As an entrepreneur, we wear many hats, especially if you're the CEO. At the beginning, you'd find me with a mop, washing the office and balancing my cash flows. And there are times you'd find me marketing. And with time, now delegating all that to different people. But I've been very intentional with capacity building, not only as a person, but also with my team, and ensuring that any opportunity that we get to enhance our skills, learn from experts like yourself and other experts that I found even in the Africa Prize, I do not hesitate to expose my team to such opportunities and even certifications that would make them competitive in the market, so that I also get that loyalty from my team, so that they see it's not only about work, it's also about enhancing their skills. Then for me, it's built my leadership to know that the business is multifaceted. There's the tech part, there's the business part, there's the marketing, there's the people management, and I have to keep myself at pace with all these things that are happening around me. So I've had to wear many hats. It's the everyday job of an entrepreneur. You think about emails, you think about investors, you think about raising finance, you think about research and development, new markets. So yeah, it's something that I enjoy, though it keeps me up some nights, if not most of the nights.
I think it's perfectly acceptable to be kept awake worrying about work. I think you're not working hard if you haven't got stuff on your mind occasionally.
I hear you, Andy.
You've talked about 1 million users in the next 8 years. Will those all be in Kenya, or will you be moving outside the boundaries of Kenya?
Thank you, Toby, for the question. Truth be told, we have over 7.5 million smallholder farmers in Kenya and over 30 million small-scale farmers on the African continent. And with our target of 1 million smallholder farmers by 2030, we are open to partnerships and even investors who can help us get to the 1 million smallholder farmers by then. We are not limited to the boundaries of Kenya. we are open to other countries within the continent and even beyond, though we did feel the need to begin from home and impact those that are closest to us, these communities that we come from, as we scale that impact to millions of other farmers globally. My target is really the global south, because the amount of food that is lost in Africa is enough to feed 1.2 billion people. That's because at least half of produce in every farming season is lost due to pests and diseases. So if we can address this root cause and deal with this issue of food security in our own way, in how we know best as Farmer Lifeline, and with partners and organizations that like the Royal Academy of Engineering, together with experts like you, Toby, with your rich experience and knowledge, both in hardware and software. I think we will get there as Farmer Lifeline, but we can't do this alone. We need support and partnerships.
Well, thank you, Esther. I'm going to hand over to Andy now to ask a couple of questions. So over to you, Andy.
Well, thank you, Toby, and thank you, Esther, as well. I think that sort of, support and partnerships comment, I think we would echo the same, that, there's a phrase, isn't there, about takes a whole village to raise a child. And, which is a slightly crude analogy, but the reality is we're a product of our influences, and having good people around us to help support and encourage is always helpful. I just wanted to sort of wrap up with maybe your perspectives, Esther, on the challenges facing, and I'm going to use the word the phrase agricultural engineering in its broader sense. We can talk about resource management, we can talk about autonomy, AI, robotics, agri-tech, we can talk about all kinds of things, but the challenges facing society, if you like to call it that, i.e. the world, and where ag engineering fits on, or what you see on the horizon, where ag engineering and agri-tech can deliver value. So, I just think it's a really interesting subject matter, and I think you maybe look at the world in a slightly different way because of where you are and what you're doing. And, I'm really interested in that.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. I really do appreciate the place of tech in agriculture, because one, it helps us break barriers. When you look at something like AI helping us even in translation of English words to very rural dialects like Yoruba and other languages, it just shows you the power that technology has to help us break barriers. Also looking at it from a gender lens, today, if I deploy this technology in India, in Nigeria, in Italy, provided that technology works as I say it does, nobody cares whether it was made by a woman or a man. So technology is actually breaking barriers that we had previously seen, and breaking limitations that we had seen, like this globe is now becoming a very small village for us through technology, and this is something that we are really proud of. Another thing is now parents and guardians encouraging more of youth into the engineering space and showing them the possibilities, even in agriculture, that they can actually solve problems that they've seen either growing up or around them, just using technology. So it's been beautiful to see what technology can do for agriculture, and I can only wait to see what more we can do together.
That is a brilliant A-star answer, Esther. Thank you very much. I think on that really, really positive final note, I think we should close now. So I'm just going to say thank you again to Esther Kimani, founder and CEO of the Farmer Lifeline. I want to call it Farmer Lifeline Technology, but I think it is Farmer Lifeline Technology. Thumbs up. And Toby Mottram, Fellow of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers and also Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineers. So thank you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Andy, for having me. I appreciate.
You're very welcome. And Toby, thank you very much for co-piloting this afternoon as a fellow questioner, stroke interviewer. So thank you both very much. I'm Andy Newbold, your host with the Landwards podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we will look forward to catching up soon.
You have been listening to Landwards, the podcast for the land-based engineering community, brought to you by the Institution of Agricultural Engineers.